welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a case, well, a story really, that's quite something. It's about this incredibly bright international student.
Top of his class, great education abroad. Seems like he had everything lined up.
Exactly. But then his dream job just
Yeah.
vanishes. And not because he wasn't skilled enough.
No, the skills were absolutely there. The rejection came down to something that feels almost trivial on the face of it, a few instances of dodging fares on public transport.
Just fare evasion.
Yeah.
So that's what we're digging into today. Why do certain systems, big companies, society even, view what looks like a small mistake as this massive character flaw?
And the specific context here is really important, isn't it? We're talking about a European public transport system.
Right, one that operates largely on trust, self-service in the name of the game.
Yeah, exactly. Looking at these European systems, the sources really emphasize this trust aspect. You're expected to figure out your destination, buy the right ticket yourself.
Self-serve.
Totally. And what really defines it is how they manage enforcement. It's low cost, you don't see ticket barriers everywhere, not tons of inspectors. Checks are pretty random.
Which is what some people call a high-trust economy, right? The idea isn't just minimal supervision, it's the underlying bet that most people will do the right thing. Because, well, trusting people is actually cheaper than watching everyone all the time.
That's the calculation. And, that exact lack of constant watching, that's what this student apparently saw.
He didn't see trust, he saw an opportunity.
He saw a loophole, that's the word used, a systemic weakness he could, leverage to save a bit of cash while he was studying. Writing without paying became a strategy.
So he's deliberately testing the boundaries, seeing what he could get away with.
Seems like it, a conscious choice. But even systems with low supervision catch people sometimes.
And he got caught.
He did! That's crucial. Over the years he was studying, he was caught and fined for fare evasion 3 times. 3 official marks on his record.
Okay, let's unpack this then. He graduates, great resume, published papers, really impressive stuff. And he starts applying for jobs. He's confident, thinks his international background is a huge plus. He targets these big multinational companies.
The ones really pushing into the Asia-Pacific market, specifically China. He thought, logically, I'm the perfect bridge candidate.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But then rejection after rejection.
Yeah, it didn't add up for him. His qualifications were stellar.
So he gets frustrated, understandably, I guess. And he actually confronts an HR manager at one of these companies, demands to know why he wasn't hired.
Right. And his initial thought, perhaps because it happened repeatedly, was bias. He suspected they were discriminating against him because of his nationality. As the source material mentions, it might have been framed.
That's a serious accusation.
Very. But the manager's response just completely flipped the script. It wasn't discrimination at all. In fact, it was the total opposite.
Okay, walk us through that conversation. Because the gap between how much they wanted him and the fact they rejected him was huge.
The manager was apparently very clear. Discrimination. Absolutely not. They were actively looking for someone exactly like him, pouring money into the Asian market, desperate for highly educated people who understood the region.
So they needed his profile.
Desperately. The manager even listed his strengths: brilliant education, top academic performance, those journal publications. Said that, based purely on workability, he was precisely the kind of talent they were searching for.
Perfect skills, perfect background, but still no job offer. So the disconnect. What was the actual reason? What did the manager say?
Due diligence. Standard procedure. The company ran background checks, including, and this is the key part, his credit record.
Wow.
And that's where they found them. The 3 penalties for public transport fare evasion, those small fines from his student days.
Suddenly they weren't so small anymore. They became this massive roadblock to his career.
Exactly. The convenience he chose back then turned into an insurmountable barrier now?
Hold on, though. We're talking maybe, 50, 60 euros in fines total? Something like that? And they reject their ideal candidate, a published academic, over that. It feels extreme.
It does feel disproportionate on the surface, definitely.
Are companies really digging into everyone's transit history?
That's a fair question. It's probably less about actively looking for transit fines and more about how these things get recorded. In some of these high-trust European systems, apparently, certain public financial issues, even minor fines like these, can get logged in the credit system or public record databases.
It talks up.
It pops up during a standard background or credit check. They weren't necessarily hunting for fare evasion. They were screening for financial responsibility, adherence to rules, that sort of thing.
Okay. And when the manager brought this up, the student tried to explain it away.
He did. He had defenses for the 3 times he was caught, tried to frame them as, honest mistakes.
Like what? What was his explanation?
Well, for the first time, he claimed he just wasn't familiar with the self-service system yet. New country, different rules.
Okay, plausible maybe for the first time?
And the manager acknowledged that the transit inspector back then probably bought it, gave him a warning, or just made him buy the ticket.
Okay.
A sort of pass.
But there were 2 more times. What about those?
His excuse for the later times, he didn't have small change, no coins in his pocket.
Right. The no change excuse.
And the manager just shut that down. Immediately, unequivocally, the reaction was apparently quite strong, something like, "That excuse insults my intelligence."
Wow. That's harsh. Why react so strongly to not having coins?
Because the manager saw it as proof the student was still trying to excuse intentional behavior as some kind of accident or minor inconvenience. And this is where it gets really damaging for the student.
How so?
The manager made an inference, a leap, suggested that the 3 times he got caught were likely just the tip of the iceberg. Meaning, the manager suspected he'd probably gotten away with it hundreds of times before those 3 instances.
Oof. That's a big assumption. Shifting from caught 3 times to probably did it hundreds of times?
It completely reframes it, doesn't it? Suddenly, he's not just guilty of the incidents on record. He's judged guilty of a calculated, habitual pattern of behavior based on inferred intent.
And that inferred intent, that's the killer in a high-trust system.
That's everything. The student apparently pushed back, asking, why make such a big deal about something so small? Couldn't I fix it?
And the manager's answer?
A firm no. The manager stated those 3 incidents proved 2 fundamental things about his character. 2 non-negotiable points that made his academic achievements basically irrelevant for this job.
Okay, let's break those down. What was the first point?
Disrespect for rules. But it wasn't just simple rule breaking.
More than that.
Yeah. The manager highlighted the calculated nature of it. He argued the student wasn't making mistakes. He was actively finding the system's weaknesses, the reliance on trust, and then maliciously exploiting them. For personal gain, even if it was small. It showed a basic lack of respect for the social contract holding that system together.
Okay, disrespect for the rules by exploiting loopholes. And the second point sounds like the real deal breaker for a corporation.
Unworthiness of trust. Absolutely. This was the core issue.
This is where it connects to the company itself.
Directly. The manager drew an explicit analogy between that public transport system and how the company operated internally. This is really the aha moment.
How does that connection work? Transit system to multinational corporation.
Okay, so just like the transit system uses self-service to avoid the massive cost of checking every single passenger.
Right, the trust is cheaper model.
Exactly. The company works the same way. They rely on employees, especially in key roles managing distant operations, to act autonomously and ethically without someone constantly looking over their shoulder.
They can't afford, as the manager put it, complex supervisory agencies for every single thing.
Precisely. They can't police every expense claim, every decision made in a foreign market, every negotiation. It's just not feasible or cost-effective.
And if this student were hired for that Asia-Pacific role?
He'd be given significant power, autonomy, authority, access to resources. He'd be operating largely unsupervised in a critical market. That demands absolute trust. The power and responsibility.
And the manager's conclusion was?
The fare evasion incidents proved that when faced with a system relying on personal integrity, the honor system, this student chose to break that trust for his own benefit.
So the logic follows. If he'd cheat the transit system for a few euros,
what might he do when entrusted with millions of the company's money or its reputation in a situation with little oversight? The ethical calculation he demonstrated was deemed too risky.
The risk was unmanageable. So despite the perfect resume,
he failed the fundamental character test, the test of trustworthiness that their entire high-trust business model depended on. Hiring him meant knowingly introducing a vulnerability.
So what's the takeaway here for you, our listener? This deep dive really highlights how something seen as minor, maybe just a convenience by the person doing it,
a small matter, as they might say,
can be read by a high-trust system, whether it's civic or corporate, as a deep character flaw, with really serious career-altering consequences.
Yeah, it wasn't about the money saved. It was about the decision-making process that the actions revealed.
And this connects to the bigger idea of high-trust versus low-trust environments, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Low-trust places pay a price in enforcement. More checks, more cameras, more oversight costs. High-trust places shift that burden onto individual character. They save money by assuming integrity.
But the flip side is, if you break that trust,
You break the foundation. You undermine the efficiency that the whole system is built on. And the consequences can be severe.
and the manager didn't just stop at rejecting him for that job, did they? There was a broader warning.
That's right. The manager basically suggested this wasn't just about their company. He implied the student might find it difficult to get a similar professional job anywhere in that country.
Or maybe even wider.
Possibly even the entire European Union, or at least that economic sphere. Because that record, those 3 fines, now existed as documented evidence of untrustworthiness within an economy built on that very principle. It was a kind of black mark for operating in that high trust zone.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to consider. Does a case like this suggest that high-trust societies actually place a heavier economic weight on individual conscience compared to low-trust ones? And what can you do proactively to make sure that even the small mistakes we all might make don't end up defining your professional character in such a permanent way?
Something definitely worth reflecting on.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.